My name is Rosa Daniels, and all I ever wanted was for my son to have a better life than mine. I worked as a housekeeper for most of my life, cleaning other people's homes, raising other people's children while mine waited for me in a small apartment on the poor side of town. I come home with my hands raw from scrubbing and my knees aching from floors that never seemed clean enough. But when Daniel ran into my arms and said, "One day I'll buy you a real house, Mama," it made every bruise worth it. He was smart, ambitious, and kind. I saved every dollar for his education. I ironed uniforms, washed cars, even sold homemade pies on weekends to pay for his books. When he graduated from college, I wore my best dress, the one I bought secondhand, and cried when they called his name. He smiled at me from the stage, and I thought I did it. I kept my promise. After that day, Daniel got a job at a big firm in the city. He moved out, bought new clothes, and started speaking differently, more polished, more formal. He still called, but less often. When I asked if I could visit, he said he was busy. I told myself it was just work, that success takes time, that my boy was adjusting to his new world. Months later, he called to say he'd met someone. Her name was Valerie. "She's perfect, Mama," he said. "Smart, beautiful, and from a good family." I smiled and told him I was happy for him, even though those last words, "a good family," stung more than I'd admit. I didn't hear from him again for weeks. Then one afternoon, while I was cleaning a client's house, I overheard them talking about a company dinner, the same firm where Daniel worked. They mentioned Valerie's father, Mr. Edwards, one of the wealthiest men in town. My heart swelled with pride. My son must be doing well, I thought. The next morning, I cooked his favorite meal, rice with chicken and sweet plantains, and decided to visit him. I wanted to surprise him, to see him in his world. I put on a clean blouse, combed my hair neatly, and carried the food in a small container. When I arrived at the office building, I felt out of place immediately. Everything was shiny, marble floors, glass doors, people walking fast in elegant clothes. I stood by the reception desk, smiling nervously. "I'm here to see Daniel Daniels," I said. The receptionist glanced at me, then hesitated. "Do you have an appointment?" I shook my head. "No, I'm his mother." Her expression softened, and she picked up the phone. Moments later, Daniel appeared, looking handsome in his suit. But when his eyes met mine, he froze. "Mama, what are you doing here?" he whispered sharply. I smiled. "I brought you lunch. You've been working so much, and I thought." He grabbed my arm, gently but firmly. "You can't just come here. People will see." "See what?" I asked. "That a mother loves her son?" Before he could answer, a young woman approached, tall, elegant, her perfume filling the air. She looked at me curiously. "Daniel, who's this?" He hesitated for half a second. She's the cleaning lady from my old building. She helped raise me when I was younger." The words hit me like a slap. I stood there, smiling through the pain, pretending not to notice how Valerie nodded politely before turning back to him. When she walked away, Daniel whispered, "Mama, please. Don't embarrass me. You shouldn't have come here like this." I looked at him quietly. "Embarrass you? I worked 20 years, so you could stand in this building. You think my presence is shameful." He avoided my eyes. "It's just, people here wouldn't understand." I nodded slowly. "I see. You're one of them now." I left the container on his desk and walked out. My hands were trembling, but my face stayed calm. I took the bus home, holding back tears as I watched the city blur past. Every stop felt longer, every thought heavier. That night, I sat in the dark of my small apartment and stared at the empty lunchbox I'd brought back. He hadn't even opened it. The next day, my neighbor asked, "How's your Daniel? Still working at that big place?" I smiled weakly. "Yes, he's doing fine." But inside, I felt something shift, not anger, not sadness, but a quiet understanding. My son was ashamed of me. He built his new life on top of everything I sacrificed, and now he wanted to erase the part that made him who he was. Still, I didn't stop loving him. Love doesn't disappear just because it hurts. I just promised myself one thing. I would never show up uninvited again. After that day, Daniel stopped calling. Weeks turned into months, and the silence between us grew thicker than the distance ever had. I told myself he was busy, that young people forget sometimes, that success makes you dizzy. But deep down, I knew something had broken. Then one Sunday afternoon, I saw him on television. He was standing beside his boss, shaking hands at a charity event. Cameras flashed, and next to him stood Valerie, elegant, perfect. The reporter called them the golden couple of the firm. I smiled faintly, though it stung. My son looked happy, but I could see it, that stiffness in his shoulders, that careful smile that never reached his eyes. A week later, a friend from church told me she'd seen Daniel and Valerie at the mall. He walked right past me, she said. He looked uncomfortable. Maybe he didn't want her to see who I was. I laughed it off, but inside my heart tightened. Then came the phone call. It wasn't from Daniel, it was from the firm. A man's voice asked politely if I could come sign some paperwork. Apparently, Daniel had listed me as a reference. I hesitated, but curiosity won. When I arrived, the same receptionist greeted me with a nervous smile. "He's in a meeting, Mrs. Daniels. You can wait in the lobby." As I sat there, Valerie came out of the elevator. She looked surprised but smiled politely. "You're Daniel's mother, right?" I froze. So he told her, finally. I nodded slowly. "Yes." She hesitated before sitting beside me. "He never mentioned much about his family. I thought maybe you lived far away." I looked at her hands, manicured, delicate, and said gently, "No. I live close, but I suppose sometimes distance isn't measured in miles." Her expression softened, but before she could say more, Daniel appeared. His face went pale. "Mama, what are you doing here again?" "I came to sign something," I said quietly. He pulled me aside, whispering angrily, "Why are you talking to her? You don't have to tell her everything." I frowned. "What is there to hide, Daniel?" He looked around, voice trembling. "Mama, please. You don't understand this world. People judge." Something inside me broke then. "No, Daniel. You judge. You've forgotten where you came from." Valerie stood a few steps away, confused and silent. Daniel forced a smile and said, "I'll call you later, Mama. Please just go home." I nodded. "I will. But remember, son, one day when the lights go out and no one's watching, you'll remember who held the candle first." Then I left. That night I prayed. Not for him to change, but for life to show him truth, the way only life can, slowly, painfully, and clearly. 3 months later, I was cleaning a small restaurant downtown when I saw Valerie again. She didn't recognize me at first. I was in my work uniform, hair tied back. But when our eyes met, she paused. "Do you work here?" she asked softly. "Yes," I said. "Part-time." She looked around awkwardly, then whispered, "Daniel lost his job. My father found out he lied on some reports. He said he did it to impress me. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. He lied." She nodded. "And when everything came out, he said it was your fault, that you pressured him, that you needed money. I didn't believe him. That's why I left." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Shame, anger, and sadness twisted together in my chest. "Thank you," I finally said, "for telling me." She hesitated. "He's not a bad man, Mrs. Daniels. He's just lost." I smiled faintly. "He'll find his way when pride stops leading him." She lowered her eyes, said goodbye, and left. I stood there alone, the mop in my hands, tears blurring my vision. My son had lied to the world and to himself, but I wasn't angry anymore, only tired. That night, I went home, lit a small candle by the window, and whispered a prayer. Not for revenge, not for punishment, just for the day Daniel would look in the mirror and finally see the woman who raised him staring back. 6 months passed before I saw Daniel again. By then, I had stopped asking about him. I worked, I prayed, and I learned to live without waiting for his calls. I still cooked enough for 2 out of habit, and every now and then I'd find myself saving leftovers, thinking he might come by. But he never did, until one night, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I barely recognized him. His face was thinner, his eyes sunken, his suit wrinkled like he hadn't taken it off in days. "Mama," he said softly, "can I come in?" I stepped aside. He sat at the table, the same place where he'd done his homework as a boy. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, finally, I lost everything. I stayed quiet. He rubbed his face. "The company fired me. They found out I forged signatures on some reports. I thought I could fix it before they noticed. Valeria left. Her father told her I was a liar. He's right. I poured him a cup of coffee. He didn't touch it. I was angry at you, he continued. When things started going wrong, I told myself it was your fault, that you'd embarrass me, that I was carrying your image. But now I see. I was just ashamed of myself. I looked at him quietly. Do you know what shame is, Daniel? It's realizing too late who truly loved you. He dropped his head into his hands and began to cry. I hadn't seen him cry since he was a child. When he could finally speak, he said, I told you that you smelled like poverty. I can't forgive myself for that. I reached across the table and took his hand. You were right, I said softly. I do smell like poverty, because poverty smells like effort, sacrifice, and love that doesn't quit. And you wouldn't exist without it. He looked up, eyes wet, guilt written all over his face. Can you forgive me? I nodded slowly. A mother forgives before her child even apologizes. That's why it hurts so much. He leaned forward and hugged me, trembling. I don't deserve you. I held him like I used to, not the grown man, but the little boy who used to fall asleep in my arms after long days. You'll do better, I whispered. That's all I ask. Over the next few months, Daniel started over. He took a job as a clerk in a small logistics office. No fancy suits, no luxury lunches. He took the bus again, greeted neighbors again. Every Sunday, he came to my apartment with groceries. We'd cook together, laugh a little, sometimes cry. One afternoon as we ate, he said, I told my new boss the truth. About you. About who you are. I smiled. And what did he say? He said I should be proud. That men like me are lucky to have mothers like you. I looked at him, my son, humbled and healing, and felt something inside finally rest. Months later, I was invited to a small ceremony at his office. When I arrived, I expected nothing, just another work event. But then I saw the sign on the wall. Employee of the Month, Daniel Delgado. The manager called him up and said, This young man has rebuilt himself from the ground up, and he says everything he's learned came from his mother. Daniel turned to the crowd and smiled. I used to be ashamed of where I came from. Now I know it's the only part of me worth respecting. When he finished, he walked to me, handed me a small bouquet, and whispered, For every lunch you brought that I didn't eat, for every tear I didn't deserve. I couldn't speak. I just hugged him, long and tight, breathing in the moment. For the first time in years, I didn't smell like poverty. I smelled like peace,